everybody, what's up? I just came on here really quick just to follow up and with some information, and not even really to follow up with some information on the Russia's war against Ukraine. You want to be careful not to call it the Russian and Ukrainian war, because it's really an attack from Russia on Ukraine. And I really want to talk to my people of color who watch my videos, people who may not be, white or Caucasian, as well as talk to them. But I mean, they're kind of demonstrating what they're about, what they've always been about. So this is not really to talk to them, but it's more to talk to people of color, and specifically African people and African American people, because I think what's happening in this situation is very insightful, enlightening, and it is definitely a precedent. Some unprecedented things are happening in this war, as well as some very, I think, pivotal and defining and changing moments going forward. So someone like me who's 35 and up, I mean, I was alive for the Gulf War, the war between America and the Middle East, and then folks who are older than me, so your 50s and up, your 60s and up, and I don't think I could say 50s and up, but your 60s and up, your 70s and up, 80s and 90s and stuff like that, they may remember World War II. I don't know if there's anybody around who would have been involved with World War I. I can't remember the year offhand, but I'm saying that to say people who are about 35 and older, maybe 30 and older, the Gulf War was in the 90s. So people who were born in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the last war that we really know about would have been the Gulf War. But we don't have that experience with war like the younger generation doesn't have that experience with war. And we know about the Gulf War and we're familiar, but even the generations that are older, like I stated, than folks who are 30 and up, they know about it a little bit more. Like back during the times of World War II, I mean, I think I have my wars correct, but back during the time, because it's been a long time since I studied or looked up World War II, but this war is bringing me back because of the implications that this war signifies. It takes me back to World War II. So with World War II, the Cold War and all of that stuff, I can remember television shows where people would be, and these are at the times when the television shows would be in like black and white a lot of the times. So before my time, but people would like have underground bunkers and do bomb drills and stuff like that. So, people who are from generations and centuries ago have more experience with war than folks who are in, say, their 20s and younger. Even folks that are younger than 30, you know what I mean, who may not have any family members or anybody that was involved in the Gulf War. And with the Gulf War, it's almost like you had to be over 30, because when it started, it was like this huge thing, and it's always been a big deal, but it kind of turned into an occupation and led on for years, right? So, some wars, they last for years. War isn't always a quick thing you fight and then it's over. But the implications of this particular war with Russian and what Putin is doing to the Ukraine and the people of the Ukraine, I think it is very insightful, and this is history repeating itself in a way, and it also sends a bigger message to Black people like me, African Americans and Africans, because this war is between people who are of the same race. And I know we all know that Caucasians rule the world. They're at the top. I mean, hey, you can say what you want to say. We can talk about the reports where they're saying they refuse to let like Black folks who are in Ukraine get on a train to get out. And it seems Indians may be having some of the same issues, based on some of the reports you may have heard going on that are happening in the Ukraine. But when you look at the bigger picture, you have to put racism aside, because racism has been going on before this war, right? So if you do hear of reports of folks being racist against blacks or Indians or just anybody that isn't Caucasian, is that anything new to you? Are you surprised enough to focus on that when there is such a much bigger picture going on with the implications of this particular war? So if you didn't listen to my last video where I give you a little bit of the history of what's going on and everything like that, listen to that video. I will put the link in the description of this video. But the bigger picture is these are all people of the same race who have certain agreements and pacts with each other, agreements and disagreements about the way that their countries and maybe the world overall should be ran. And this war is happening between people of the same race and different powers and elites that be, because this particular race of people runs the world. So the people at the top who make all the decisions, no matter what you see, elections or whatever the case, the families and the people who run this world to get together, have conferences, make decisions and laws about this world and how it's going to run, they aren't any color for the most part other than Caucasians, I would say. Now, there are, of course, people of color at the table and a part of these conversations, from the Chinese or the Japanese to the Indian to Africans. We're all a part of this world's government, right? Because depending on who's running Africa and who's running United Kingdom and Germany and USA and Canada and Russia, depending on how they're running their particular and succinct countries, could have an effect on other countries or the whole world. And that's just a very basic concept, that you learn probably in elementary school growing up. None of us exist on this planet alone. What we do has a ripple effect on others throughout the world. So race aside for a second, because if we want to, I like to get to the point and just flatline stuff and cut out a lot of the noise and the propaganda that people try to make, because a lot of concepts are really simple. But you got to put racism aside, because in general, overall, blacks, Africans, when I say black, I mean Africans from the continent, Africans from America or any country you're from, and to a lesser degree, I mean people who are more melanated and of color. So that would be like even your Indians, but I have to kind of leave them out of the equation because they run their own country. And they have somewhat more, they're coming up in the economy, right? And politically. Although I would venture to say they aren't a hell of a lot further ahead than Africa. But, I'll get some statistics and put them in this video and put them on the screen. But when I say black, for the majority purposes, I'm talking about blacks from the continent of Africa and blacks all over the world. So when I pulled the list of countries who have nuclear weapons, Africa was nowhere on there. When it comes to political and governmental decisions that affect the world, the worth of the currency there, their economic infrastructure, the country's infrastructure, and their political influence. I mean, I'll go Google it, because you can't just listen to people talk. You really have to look at various sources and statistics to make sure what they're saying is correct. So I'll put some statistics, and anything I'm saying, anybody can always go look up in Google or read a book, go to the library, whatever you want to do. Ask your professor. But I'm willing to bet money without even having the statistical facts in front of me first. I think I'm wise enough to know that Africa probably places pretty far down on the list I just named about the influence that they hold across all different genres that would make you a world superpower or a country to be reckoned with, like Russia or America. So right now, I have to look at the bigger picture, and I can't focus on race issues, and I encourage everyone to do the same. Because when you look at this, what you're looking at is folks of the same race who used to be a part of the same Reich, I'll call it. So Putin, strong believer in the former USSR, Soviet, and all that kind of stuff, and wanting to get Russia back to what it was when it was the USSR. And that would include the countries of Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, and there's one more, and I want to make sure I'm pronouncing them correct. So I am going to pull up the countries that used to be a part of the Soviet Union, and I'll put the picture in this video that sit right outside of Ukraine. And yeah, that was Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. So if you look at the picture that I show on the screen, and the area that's circled in red, first of all of the blue are the NATO members. So they are all European nations who have signed an agreement, under the Article 5 that says attack against one is an attack against all, as you heard the president say in his briefing the other day. So they have signed this pact to pretty much be alliances, right? So then the other countries that you see sort of in the grayish, brownish color, and of course Russia in the red, they are not a part of NATO. So they don't have any agreements to NATO, or in other words, democracy, right? Or what we quote unquote, I'm not going to say quote unquote every time, but just know when I say democracy, I mean quote unquote. One's a bit quote unquote freer than the other, but we're all under the reign of the powerful elites, which are just happen to be Caucasians. I don't know. Maybe there's an Indian or a black person somewhere up in there, but as far as I know, it's Caucasians, right? So if you could see why, when we talk about former USSR, we're talking about Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. And I believe that is it, if I'm not mistaken, but I'll put the picture of the former USSR Soviet states here, which you all know were run under Hitler. That was during Hitler's reign, right? And we all know what happened with Hitler. And if we don't know what happened with Hitler, just take a couple sleeping pills and go back to sleep. So when you look at how detrimental it is that NATO now has this pact, right? So NATO has been around, if you look up in the corner at the key in blue, they've been around since 1949. And the darker the color blue, the further back their history goes with NATO. The further back they joined NATO. So you can see that countries that surround Ukraine, like Bulgaria, Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, Hungary, Poland, Estonia, have joined the European unions and NATO in the somewhere in the 1900s, and more recently in the 2000s and the 2010s, after the whole Hitler regime and everything like that. Ukraine never joined NATO. So if you look at that map and you see how Russia going into Ukraine, trying to overtake Kyiv and going up into Belarus, they're surrounded by NATO countries. And President Biden said America will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. And that's what some of these other countries are vowing to do. So Putin knows this. Part of Putin's whole gripe is that he wants Ukraine to agree to not join NATO. So really putting that old Russia back together. And then the war is really between these different ideas of political rule, these different beliefs or oligarchs. So with NATO and the West believing in democracy, and then you have the East, Russia, and some of these countries like China, I believe it's China, that are more communist. So one dictator, one ruler, they never leave out of office, that kind of thing. There's no vision, or there's no portrayal to the public of selecting your leaders or there being a democracy, right? So when you look at that and you look at how Putin wants to go back to this Hitler-like time, and NATO have made these pacts and agreements, and they're not having it. And if Putin crosses a line, or this thing just goes, it's already bad. If it goes from bad to worse, we really, truly could be talking about a world war. Technically, I'm not going to call this a world war because it's really between Russia and Ukraine. But with all of the help that the Ukraine is getting from countries like Germany, America, Poland, a lot of the refugees are going into Poland, those surrounding countries. America has soldiers in those former Soviet states that I just named Latvia, Lithuania, I don't know why I keep forgetting the other one. In Estonia, there is American presence there. There are American soldiers there due to the NATO agreement. And I think when you look at how the Ukrainians are sticking together, how much they believe in their sovereignty. They've been sovereign since Hitler, and they aren't under Russia's communist rule. And they believe in their countrymen and their brotherhood so much that the citizens don't even have to be coerced. Yes, they did go. The president did. Vladimir. He did go into. He did. Guys, I'm trying to watch the news and talk to you guys at the same time. But he did instate martial law, saying that, and I'm talking about the president of Ukraine. Him and Putin have the same first name, just spelled different. Listen to my video from the other day, and I explain that and why I pronounce it like that. But he did instate martial law. So the men from, I forget the ages, like 18 or something up through 60, they have to stay and defend the country. So some are forced to stay because martial law has been instated, but a lot of the people have volunteered to stay. You have the two brothers that were boxers who are going back. They are here. They are in politics. They are successful. They are going back to fight for Ukraine. You have people, I just saw, it was a guy, he looked black, he was kind of mixed, and some other folks from surrounding countries volunteering to go to Ukraine and fight. It goes to show you the brotherhood and solidarity that these people have, and the patriotism that they have to their country to stand against a particular type of rule that they don't want to be under. And I think this is really a situation that Black people and people of color can look at and watch and really honestly learn how to work together. Is humanity always going to fight and feud? Yes. The whites fight between each other. They've done it through the dark ages. Regimes have taken over other regimes. Certain dynasties have killed other dynasties. I mean, it happens. It happens in every race and in every culture. But it really is a time where Blacks have to be able to recognize their nationality more than their ethnicity, I should say, if that makes sense. And I hope I'm using the right word when I say more than their ethnicity. Because nationality, or is it the other way around? I believe I'm saying it the right way because I'm basically saying it to mean you have to have a home base in nationality and know where your bloodline is from and where your history is. The reason why you see that they have these NATO agreements and I'm really using the basis as a European Union or everything that stems out of Europe. They're still brothers at the end of the day. Yes, whites are in America. Whites, quote unquote, they run America, but they still have connections and ties and know where they came from. They're brethrens in the East. So those countries like Germany, UK, Britain, France, London, England, all of that stuff. That's the UK, right? They came here from there and they know that's where their history began. So that's why they have these alliances and these unions, and they're forced to be reckoned with because of the amounts of money that they have acquired, whether that's been through stealing, treason, war, and all that. We know the history. But to other countries and other people and people of color, if they want to be a political voice, you have to first come together. And a lot of times Africans in America and abroad in any country, province, state, or anywhere, a lot of times they aren't in important conversations and in important world decisions because there is no real brotherhood. There is no seeing a bigger goal and making a sacrifice for the overall mission. There's just a lot of turncoat and backstabbing. And I just see a lot of things, and I don't, it just doesn't make sense at this point that, everybody black doesn't recognize you're from Africa. And no matter where you live and for how many generations, there needs to be some sort of allegiance to that land and that continent, and a sense of brotherhood so that we can climb further up the economic and political ladder. And I think how all of these European nations and countries that rule the world are coming to the defense of Ukraine, sending weapons, taking in their refugees, the Ukrainians, but you, as you see, is set by the example of the Ukrainians themselves. They're not just going to let Hitler come in and take the country back without a fight. Men are sending their wives and children off to go, and women and children are leaving their men and their husbands there to fight, not because they want to, not because it's not sad and it isn't painful, but because you have to stand up and fight for something if you want to live, if you want your children to have a future, and if you want their children to have a future, and you don't want to be an enslaved people, and you don't want to be a marginalized people, and you don't want to be a racially discriminated against people. You have to, there are power in numbers. There's power in sovereignty. There's power in patriotism. There is power in nationality, and where you come from, and being able to claim some place as your home land and having power as a collective. And that's really what is happening right now with this war, because at the end of the day, Russia and the United States are basically the two world superpowers. And when we talk about superpowers, what you're really looking at the end of the day, you can listen to a lot of stories and listen to a lot of the fluff, but what you're really looking at the end of the day is who has the power to control this world. And right now, in this time, not 100 years ago and not 100 years into the future, in this particular moment, money and weapons run the world. Whether you like it or not, whether it should be that way or not, that's what it is. And it must be intended because it is happening. So I know a lot of people who say, oh, it shouldn't be that way. God didn't make it that way. Yes, he did, because this is what's happening. And it seems like Earth has always been a brutal place. Not just man himself, animals, the weather, the terrain. I like reality checks, guys, and I like to live in reality. I don't really like fantasies. You know what I mean? You got to at least know what you're dealing with so you know how to deal with it. So we just have to be honest when we look at what's happening right now. And when we talk about what runs the world, money and weapons, Russia and America are the two world superpowers. China, they're a big deal, but compared to Russia and America's 5,000 plus nuclear weapons, compared to China's 300 and under 400, there are 355 or so nuclear weapons that they own and they have. They aren't. If you don't have the power to destroy the world, then you can't be the top one at the. You're not. You might be a superpower, but you aren't the top ones. Because if a war was to happen, we have so many nukes. Russia has so many nukes to destroy any other country in this world. And once you get past, the countries that have nuclear weapons, once you get past China, you basically drop into the hundreds, and then you drop even further down into 2-digit numbers as far as how many nuclear weapons, say like North Korea. I think they have less than 50. Israel, 2-digit numbers. You know what I'm saying? India, either in the hundreds or 2 different numbers. I can't remember, but I'll put a screenshot with the links to all of the source information in this video. But when you look at that, having that power to destroy the world makes you a world superpower. And when I post the sources of the information, you'll see that China is trying to actively expand their nuclear weapons. Why do countries have nuclear weapons? To protect themselves against invasions and attacks. Since the beginning of time, since the beginning of humanity, the strongest will survive. Man can do anything. There's nothing stopping man from just going and raping and pillaging a village and taking over lands that he's not from. The devil isn't man. Man is half God, half devil. The same way a human is half man, half woman. It's like a good side and a bad side. The sun and the moon, the heat and the rain. Whatever you want to call it. There's all the yin and the yang. There's always a method to madness. There's always a bad side to a good side and a good side to a bad side. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is good all the time. So to stop people from raping, pillaging, putting you in slavery, to defend whatever it is you stand for as a person, you have to have weapons. Cultures who had the better weapons and the better fighting skills and tactics are the ones who control this world today. So it's if you don't get emotional about your views and your thoughts on politics in the world, that's why I find that some people who are very educated intellectually and spiritually, that are very well-rounded when it comes to just having a educated mind. And when I say education, I don't just mean book smarts, but like world education, world views. World politics is absolutely an interesting subject, but people who are educated in that fashion kind of know what's going on and don't have a lot of time to invest emotions into a lot of the matrix politics that you see, because we can understand the bigger picture, why things are like, well, I don't know if we'll ever know the whys, but we can at least recognize how things are, how they got the way they are. And but the one thing that's sad is I don't know any solutions, people, because I don't know if there is one. And maybe the world will always be this way. But at the end of the day, a lot can be learned from looking at what is happening in this war. It is unprecedented times. NATO has never had to come together and activate and defend each other in this way. Putin trying to take power over Ukraine, a sovereign land, there's no more Soviet Union since Hitler. That's a huge move that goes against everything that all these other countries that I just showed you stand for. And it is having world implications, because let's just take, for example, Americans. Your gas is going to go up. Russia is the highest importer of fossil fuels. And if you want to know the truth, if you really want to not want to know the truth, because that's not hard to find out. If you want to get a better perspective, Russia has more nuclear weapons than the USA. If you want to get a better perspective, there are certain countries, when I hear that we're in conflict with them and it's serious, I don't like it. And we always know Russia and China are like the top 2. And then your Middle East countries would be like number 3. But Russia is definitely one you don't want to hear that we're in a war with. Something that, even if you're overestimating and going down the rabbit hole further than you need to, could eventually turn into a nuclear war. I mean, it's just not something that, and it's a dictator against a very, very powerful countries who believe in the way that they rule, which they call democracy. So you're going to see things like whatever imports that Russia sends out, it's not going to be accessible like it used to be. We're going to have to think of alternatives to the oil and the gas and the things like that. They're talking about going back to coal, which aren't necessarily clean ways to, meet that necessity. It's affecting sports, big events. FIFA, people love soccer, aka football, around the world. Us Americans call it soccer. Russia, they're not going to be able to play. Other teams are going to pull out if Russia can play. Space programs, we can't work together. Like the economy, stores are pulling Russian alcohol and Russian liquor off of the shelves. And just whatever else. I think they were saying something like their Apple Pays in Russia. If they're trying to use Apple Pay, if they're trying to use different things, it's not working for them. This is pretty huge when you put it in perspective and you look at the bigger picture. You put race and you put everything aside and you look at the bigger picture. Because it's really just about who runs shit and who's in power. That's what it's really, truly about. And the Ukrainians, I don't give a fuck who over there is racist, what they doing. They've taught me a lesson I already knew. I have a lot of respect for the Ukrainian president. He, at least what you see from people on the ground and in news reports, you can trust. He is in arms. He is on the streets fighting with his people. And not only are some people, we can't negate the fact that martial law is in effect and some people have to fight. But a lot of those people, I don't want to say most because Ukraine is a big country. A lot of those people want to fight for their country at the expense of dying, losing, just like when men of war go off at any other time. You know what I mean? So, but these people are volunteering. They were saying, when I was watching a news report that was on the ground with video camera there, they were saying the line of people to get out of the country was just as long as the line for people to get into the country. Well, just the men between those ages up to 60 get a gun and to fight. So it just really gives you some perspective when you have pride in your country, your ethnicity, who you are. It really speaks to us coming together as a black nation. Blacks in Africa and blacks in America and beyond and abroad. And then an even bigger discussion to come from this whole thing is really just nuclear weapons and powers and just being more informed about what is really going on out here politically. Because if you don't know the history, if you're not aware of NATO, the pacts that were made, the agreements that are signed, the European Union, the allies, and things that are in place based on historical events that have happened in the past, like the former Soviet Union and the rule of Hitler, to going to having a ruler or a president like Putin and what is happening in this very moment. Biden did say emphatically that he wasn't sending Americans to fight in Ukraine. He was sending Americans to occupy and protect not all of those, but a lot of those surrounding countries, especially the former Soviet countries, from any invasion that could possibly happen from Putin. So this is a much bigger event based on historical events that there's no way to turn this back. It's almost like the COVID of wars. In my video earlier, and this is 34 minutes, and I'm kind of pissed because I really have to learn how to condense my quick points down into 10 minutes and under, but it always seems like it's so much to say. But in the video I recorded earlier that I'm not going to upload, it was a voice video. It wasn't on camera or anything. But I talked about the age of Aquarius and us moving into a scientific age. And with Saturn Saturn and Pluto having moved up through Capricorn and then going into Aquarius, and there being some retrograde going on. I mean, these are two big deal, badass, not playing with your ass planets who are going to have all of this stuff pop off. And it's teeter and tottering, and it between Capricorn, the planet of government, military, work, relentlessness, hard, father time, lessons, learning lessons through hard experiences, and Aquarius, out of this world vision, so much so that it doesn't have to make moral sense. Science that doesn't make moral sense. Science at the expense of morals. New science. Just everything weird kicked up to the 100th level is Aquarius. So it is not any wonder to anybody who is in tune with the universe, pays attention to his history, or is astronomically inclined to understand that why these things are happening, the times we are living in, and where things are headed. So I just wanted to say that to you all, because I wanted to address some of the things that are going on with race. But it's almost like if I don't have a place to live, or I don't have any food, am I really going to cry because I don't have a car? That's kind of how I'm viewing this situation in racism. We don't have much of a leg to stand on. There's no brotherhood or solidarity between Africans across all nations, countries, and diasporas. The African nation that does rule itself is actually ruled by outside interest and doesn't land at the top of any list you want to talk about economically or politically. None. So, just some things to ponder and to think about as we go on with our day-to-day lives through all of this chaos and mayhem that we call planet Earth. Deuces, people. I'm out.